Welcome, viewers, to another episode of This Month in Previews, a month of gathering where we, the crew members from the Comics Community Podcast, sit down with the latest Diamond Previews catalog to highlight some of our most anticipated and noteworthy comics and comics-related stuff coming out 2 months from now in comic shops all over the country. I'm Phil, your host, and joining me for this month's show are folks that all our regular listeners will be familiar with. Let's meet them now. We've got Mitch.
Hello.
Next up is Raphael.
Hey guys, I'm still here.
And Randy.
How you doing?
Our favorite place to get previews also happens to be our, well, listen there. Our favorite place to get previews also happens to be our sponsor, Summit Comics and Games, located in downtown Lansing, Michigan. If you're in the area, look for Summit just a few blocks from the Capitol building at 216 South Washington Square. But you can visit Summit online anytime at summitlansing.com. Also, quick announcement, the Comics Community Podcast will be undergoing a facelift. We're going to be moving to a new home. This fall, after we return from our summer break, we're going to be returning as the Read a Comic podcast. To learn more, listen to our regular episodes of our show, the Comics Community Podcast, and then head over to readacomic.com and bookmark it now, so you'll be all set to check us out when we return this fall. So onward to previews. This month's issue is number 345, dated June 2017. As we said, Previews is a special catalog. It's the catalog used by comic shops everywhere to pre-order comics that'll be coming out 2 months from now. That means that the things that we're going to be talking about on today's show will also be going on sale no sooner than this August. I noticed too, and guys, do you notice this to be the same? A lot of like the trade paperbacks or higher priced items, oftentimes they'll do a pre-solicit. It's like, we're telling you about it now, but you can't order it. It's going to be ordered next month.
I noticed a lot of those like coming out, September kind of time frame.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of later fall books, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in this catalog. Certainly in our list. Anyway, lucky for us, though, many comic shops and online stores make previews available to their customers so that people like us can place pre-orders through them. Previews is just one book, but it's got a different cover on each side, and that's what you see here on the left and in the middle. But Marvel books are listed in their own catalog, and that's what you see on the right. Both catalogs, though, should be packaged together when you get your copy of Previews. But if you can't find a copy, then visit Diamond's online version at previewsworld.com/catalog. Also, important to note, before you place orders with your shop, be sure to ask them about any pre-order policies that they may have in place, and take note that the cutoff date for submitting orders to your favorite retailer this month, the books that we're going to be highlighting, is June 18th, 2017. Each of our panelists have been asked to choose up to 3 number ones, 3 returning titles, 1 original graphic novel, and 1 trade or hardcover collection for each of the premier publishers in the front of the catalog. That's DC, Dark Horse, IDW, Image, and Marvel. And then we'll wrap up with some picks from the indie comics and merchandise sections in the back. And like we always do, we'll start with the premier publisher up front. This lists book alphabetically. Boy, I can't talk today. Alphabetically by publisher. So we're going to start like we always do with Dark Horse. Now, only one of us had a number 1 from Dark Horse this month. So Raphael, tell us what you found.
All right, Phil. Well, my number 1 pick was Halo: Rise of Atriox, number 1. This is a tie-in to the Halo Wars 2 video game that came out I want to say 3, maybe 4 months ago. I haven't played it yet because I'm still actually playing through the first one. But I guess one of the big complaints from the second game was that the main antagonist, who is the giant monkey guy you see on the cover there, didn't get much screen time. So this comic is kind of coming out to fill in some of the gaps of his story. And it's also done in anthology format, which I'm always a fan of. I like getting the little snippets of stories. I think there's supposed to be a few in each one, so that's also something to look forward to, especially coming off of my Dark Souls kick. So definitely pick this up if you're a Halo fan. It doesn't seem like you have to play the game to really get into it. If anything, I'd say play it before you play the game.
How old's that franchise? Have you been
Halo?
Mm-hmm.
Geez, man. I know the first one came out in I want to say 2002, 2004.
I played it while I was in the dorms, so it had to have been 2002 or after.
Okay. Very good. I was there for the first one, but then haven't played since. How many games have there been since then, since it rolled out?
Well, it kind of depends on what you want to call an actual Halo game, because the people who originally made it, Bungie, they stopped actually making the games themselves, and it got taken over by another developing studio. So anything after like, I want to say like Halo 3 is technically kind of like its own thing. But I think they're coming out with 6 soon because they just did 5.
Oh boy.
So it's almost like a whole new trilogy that they've done already.
Wow.
And then they have a few side games like this one that they're doing, which is an RTS. But it's actually a lot of fun. I'd recommend it.
Okay. And I know you get a lot of Titan on your list, but other than Titan and Dark Horse, can you think of another publisher that would be known, or that you would go to for game license titles?
Well, that kind of depends. I was actually kind of shocked to see this in the Dark Horse section. It's really weird how different games kind of just get picked up by different licenses. Like, I'm pretty sure EVE Online and Halo are both owned by Dark Horse. But it seems like every single other game is actually working with Titan right now. And they're putting out some really good comics. The other ones, maybe like, kind of like indie games or like third-party games, you might see them pop up in like Boom or something like that. But it's really rare. So I'd say Titan is definitely the number one, and Dark Horse is a close second.
Okay. Pretty good. Well, next when we have them, we highlight the titles that more than one of us had on our lists. We call those our featured books, and this month we share 2 from Dark Horse. The first has kind of become a staple. Shows up every month, courtesy of Randy and myself. Hey, Randy, I'm up to date, unlike last time we talked. Are you up to date on this?
I have not read the latest one that's out.
Okay. It comes out too slowly. And I should say too, I've read through it twice. I went back to warm up when I was catching up, and it was just fun the second time.
I feel like that would be a good thing to do with this book. Not that it's confusing, but it's enjoyable, and there's a lot going on in such kind of a confined space.
Yeah. That
it's just really enjoyable, and it's cool artwork, and there's a mystery, and I want to know what's up with it.
Yes. It's weird. I can't talk about more without. We should have just a show where we can spoil the hell out of this.
Yes, we should.
Okay.
For those of you just listening, this is Black Hammer number 12.
Oh, yes, we didn't say that. You should be watching. It's much more exciting. Yeah. Next, though, Mitch and Raphael, you guys share a pick.
Yeah, Predator Hunters, number 4 of 5.
As always, you have excellent taste, Mitch.
Of course. So do you.
You said 4 or 5. How many Predator series would you guess are currently out right now?
I think they just have like the 2, like Alien versus Predator, and then you have whatever Predator that they're doing right now that ties in with Prometheus or whatever. Mitch is probably a little bit more on track with that.
Because there's the Stoko version, right?
No, that's Aliens.
Oh, that's Aliens. My bad. Yes.
Right now, I think this is the only Predator book still going. I'm not sure if the other Predator book finished or not. It's hard to remember, honestly.
Okay.
Have you read the first issue of this, Mitch?
Yes, I did.
It is a treat. To give you a basic idea, it's kind of like an A-team that they've assembled of people who have survived Predator encounters. And something that I didn't notice, because I haven't read, as many of the old books that came out in like the 90s, a lot of the situations that they pull these characters from are old story arcs that they did. So I think one that they did in like 2004 was set in like Iraq, and they have like an Iraq veteran who survived like an encounter that is really reminiscent of a scenario that they did in that book. So it's cool to see them draw all these like old characters from different story arcs that they've done and bring them all back into one comic.
Yeah, it is pretty cool to see like the different random people that survived and why they might want to, get back at the Predators.
That sounds fun. Mitch, I know you had one more returning title also from Dark Horse.
Yeah, I had Rebels, these free and independent states, number 6. It's a very good comic about American history. If you ever wanted to know, not necessarily about the biggest events, but maybe small events that make up some of the biggest events. So, for example, this book, number 6, is going to be about a specific point in history about George Washington before he became General George Washington. He was actually in the British Army, and apparently he started the French and Indian War, which I did not know. So I guess we'll read this comic and see.
All right. I had 2 from Dark Horse as well, returning. First one, Shadows on the Grave, always a favorite, Richard Corbin. This will be on my list next month too, which is I think when I think it's an 8-issue miniseries ends. Are you getting this, Mitch? Or
I'm not getting it currently, no, but I'll
Okay.
probably collect it when it gets collected in trade.
Okay. And then also, so Richard Corbin for me is just good fun. And Neil Gaiman, American Gods. Anybody watching this series right now?
No.
Nope.
Okay. And I'm reading the book, so I've been leaving the comic alone and the series alone, so I don't have much to say about this, other than that it's a great novel, and hopefully they're doing it justice. Speaking of TV shows, though, Raphael, you've got one that's coming to the screen.
Yep. My next pick was Briggs Land, Lone Wolves, number 3. I actually haven't read the first issue. I'm not even sure if it's out yet. I'm kind of going back through and reading all the other Briggs Land comics. I think there was 9 issues that came out, and it's kind of its own self-contained series before this. And I talked about it, more at length in another previews episode a while ago. So I just kind of want to summarize it really quick. It's basically a group of people who live, like miles outside of New York in kind of like a foresty area. And due to like a legal loophole, the land that they own is not considered part of the United States of America. So the people who live on this land are kind of their own sovereign nation. And at first, it was a great community. Everybody helped each other out. But it slowly turned into kind of like a white supremacist paramilitary group. And the person who is now leading the community is trying to lead them away from that. And there's a lot of conflict within the community. And it's her just trying to deal with it. And the second run, entitled Lone Wolves, kind of deals with the fact that some people who aren't too familiar with them kind of cross onto their territory and kind of start camping on their land, and it turns into kind of a huge national incident. So it's more kind of political this time around, but it's definitely an interesting series. I don't think I've ever read anything like it before, and I'd love to see it be turned into a TV show.
Was it plot or creators that brought you to this? I see Brian Wood is scribing. I had not heard of the art team.
I think it was like maybe 2 episodes of previews back. This was actually one of their featured picks, and it had mentioned that there was a series that was previous, and it had won an award or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, did well enough to warrant a sequel, and it's going to get a TV show. I might as well get into it now and start checking it out. But of course, the fact that Brian Wood is on it definitely helped out a lot, since he did a lot of the writing for Aliens Defiance, and I love that series so much.
Okay. Well, let's move to graphic novels, collected editions from Dark Horse. We've got kind of a stack this month. Randy, I know you've got at least one.
Yes, I do. I've been collecting and reading these. This is the latest one, Avatar: The Last Airbender, North and South. These library edition hardcover books are pretty awesome because on the inside you get a lot of behind the scenes sketchbook sections, and there's also it's made by the same creators of the show, so it's the continuation of the cartoon. And there's these little like note sections in the margins where you kind of get like what they were thinking or what they modeled the story after. So while you're reading it, you get like a director commentary. So they're really worth it if you like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's a great addition to your shelf.
And if you've not heard of the writer, he is award-winning, has won several prestigious awards. You should Google him as well. That might lend some more credence to those who might initially pass this by. Raphael, I know you've got a collected edition on your list as well.
Yep. To follow that up, I have something a little less serious, but still a lot of fun to read. Archy versus Predator hardcover edition. I picked this up in just its normal issues when it was first coming out. And I think it was the biggest kick to show it to my friends. And they like, oh, you should check out this new comic. It's really great. I think it's going to win a whole bunch of awards. And I'd love to get in hardcover just to put it on the bookshelf, or maybe lend it out to a friend who, I showed the first, few issues to. It's just a fun series. It's just a good thing to kind of turn your brain off and read. It's not enough comics that I read are, silly enough. This is a nice departure from all the serious stuff I read.
Quite the clash of genres or franchises there. I noticed too that it's been out for a while already. So even though it looks like it's being reissued here in books, that doesn't mean you might still find copies in shops right now. So
Possibly.
I also got these in floppy form too. It was you're right. It turns heads to people who might otherwise pass either one of those franchises by. And Mitch, you've got a stack. Why don't you finish out Dark Horse for us?
Okay, yeah, I went a little overboard here, but the first one is page 38. It's Mr. Higgins Comes Home, a hardcover. It's previews picked it as one of their gems of the month, and it's a Mike Mignola vampire comic, which is not too out of the ordinary. But the thing about Mike Mignola that a lot of people don't really think about, because he's the horror comic guy, they don't think about how humorous he is and how funny some of his writing is, especially characters like Hellboy. He's actually a pretty funny character. He makes a lot of jokes and stuff like that. And this book is kind of a send up of the vampire genre. It's not necessarily a straight horror comic or anything like that. And if you look on page 38 of the previews and 39, there's a 2-page spread of what at least a couple of pages are going to be about. And it's just kind of, it's funny. There's not a lot of dialogue or anything like that, but just the tone of it is humorous, and the art is a little different than what you normally see in a Mike Mignola comic. So definitely interested in picking that up. Let's see, what do we have next on the list? We have, Rashomon Commissioner Heigu Kobayashi Case hardcover. So this is an interesting, there's like a subgenre in Japanese stories of the feudal era detective. I don't know if there actually were feudal era detectives in Japan, but there's definitely a subgenre of fiction that deals with that particular type of story. And this is one of those, there's a body of a samurai found, and they call on this great detective to try and figure it out. So I'm always interested when I see stories like this, just to read their take on Japanese history.
You surprised me with this one.
And then finally is Baltimore, Volume 8, The Red Kingdom, on page 42. And this is just a series I've been collecting. So, the trade is now coming out. So if you heard me mention this series before and you wanted to pick it up, here is the full volume. And I've never really read any of the other Baltimore stories. As you can see, this is Volume 8. I didn't read any of the other volumes. So this one was easy to just pick up and understand what's going on and start right from there.
We mentioned him a lot on the show, but I have no experience with Mignola. I know, Raphael, you're a Hellboy fan, are you not?
Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir, I am.
Okay. I need to get with you guys offline for some good jumping on points. Although Mitch said it sounds like these are self-contained anyways, so
yeah, as far as I can tell, they usually are.
Maybe this will be the
A lot of its own little side stories and independent characters that get their own comics. So there's tons of jumping on points for you.
I was gonna say, are you able to, after you see the history of, if you're familiar with the line, are there large overarching, arcs or growth of character that you wouldn't see if you just read one or two miniseries or whatnot?
I think for Hellboy, there certainly is.
Okay. All right. Whetting my appetite. I never placed my order until this show because you guys always give me new things for my sheet.
Well, all right.
Okay, well, that's just the first publisher. Let's move on to DC. Mitch, why don't you just keep us going? Because I know you found some number ones.
Okay. So we've got, of course, Dark Knight's Metal, number 1 of 6. This is going to be DC's new big event. I honestly have no idea what this is going to be about, other than DC has been setting up some kind of big war to come. And I don't honestly know if this event is going to deal with that or not. But it seems like somebody just said, hey, why don't we mix the DC universe with heavy metal album covers and see if we can make a story out of that.
Is this their attempt at Old Man Logan?
I don't know. Maybe
is it the original characters, or are they otherworldly versions of them?
I'm not sure. I know, well, from what I've read, Scott Snyder, I think it's just Snyder's been his pet Batman project for a long time, and he kind of describes it as his Dark Knight. And I think that I think it might exist outside of continuity, so they had a little leeway, but I can't say that for sure. Anyway, I think it's more than just a DC cash grab. I think that Snyder has had this brewing for a while.
Cool.
And it's a 6-issue miniseries. And then I've got another miniseries that kind of caught my eye, which was Mr. Miracle, #1 of 12. I'm not really too familiar with Miracle Man or anything like that, but I just saw this issue, this #1, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. I've been kind of avoiding this character for like 20 years. I guess I'll finally see what he's all about. Phil, are you familiar with Miracle Man?
Well, I'm glad you bring this up because I was going to pop quiz the group. What other recently famous 12-issue miniseries is this writer known for?
Tom King?
Mm-hmm. The answer is The Vision.
Ah.
So I'm getting this based on the writer alone. I, like you, I'm not familiar at all with the character, but this is going to make me become so, simply because Tom King's on it.
Well, all right.
After his Vision run, I want to get on his 12-issue miniseries featuring some character I don't know much about, just like Vision.
Yeah, I mean, if he can do it with Vision, he can do it with anybody, I suppose.
Yeah. Maybe he has a little more leeway because, well, see, I'm not that familiar with DC stuff, so I'm not sure how huge Mr. Miracle is in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know how much leeway he'll have to play with him.
It was part of Kirby's Fourth World. It's where Mr. Miracle started.
Okay. So he's been around certainly for a long time. Anyway, I'm glad I was happy to see this on your list. Again, I was not aware of this until I saw this.
Well, all right. And then the final #1 I had was the New Gods special, #1. And what struck me with this one was the name Walt Simonson. He seems to be making a bit of a comeback these days. So he's going to be involved in this New Gods special #1. And again, they're also delving into more Kirby stuff here with the New Gods. So it's just interesting to see that DC is kind of branching out a little bit. You know, they've over the last couple of years, they've done all this work to compact their DC universe all together into one, you know, semi-cohesive universe. And now they're kind of breaking it apart again. And I think that's from some fan feedback of people saying we want some continuity, but we don't mind if there are things that are out of continuity as well. So maybe something like this can help them branch out even more.
Nice. Still got some DC #1s. Raphael had 2.
Speaking of things that aren't in continuity, my first selection was Nightwing, The New Order, #1. And I don't read a lot of DC comics, but I do really enjoy Nightwing as a character. This is kind of like their version of What If, and the idea is that Nightwing basically enacts like a kind of like a government registration thing that ends in the result of basically all superheroes being killed because they're deemed too dangerous. And Nightwing is kind of the head of like a new world order, and he kind of controls like a military regime. And this doesn't seem like the Dick Grayson that I've read before. So I'm kind of interested to see like you know, where the miniseries goes and what it really brings to the character, because he's never been more like kind of a serious, like, you know, I need to change the world kind of guy. He's more small time. You know, he's always kind of like Batman's sidekick. So definitely a different spin on things that I can't wait to see. And then my next selection was something kind of more of a leap of faith, and that's Sandman Special #1. Now, you guys have heard me talk about how much I like Neil Gaiman's Sandman, but there was actually a Sandman in DC Comics that came before him. And if you're familiar with the actual Neil Gaiman Sandman, this character makes a cameo. I want to say like midway through the series, and he's just a ghost of his former self, and he just gets killed. Basically, Morpheus just kind of looks at him, and he disintegrates. But they do reference the character as being, you know, like the master of dreams and a friend to all children and stuff like that. He's kind of like a really old school hero. And I've kind of always been more curious about what his character actually was, considering that the version that I saw was just kind of a ghost of his former self. So I definitely would just want to pick it up just to see a little bit more of the, you know, character of who he was before, Neil Gaiman got a hold of him.
I'm just now for the first time looking at the description for this, and I see the names Brute and Glob, which I would have always thought came from the Neil Gaiman Sandman. But here they are being introduced as part of this storyline, so it makes me wonder if those characters are older than Gaiman's Sandman.
He does borrow a lot from the DC universe, so it could be possible.
Yeah.
In the actual Sandman series, they're just addressed as being nightmares that Morpheus actually created. So maybe it's just a good segue into the series.
There might be some a little mixing there by Dan Jurgens. Interesting pick. That's it for premieres that we had from DC. I'm going to throw it back to Mitch to kick us off for returning titles.
Sure. Let's see. Page 112. I've got Batman and the Shadow #5. It's a 6-issue miniseries that I've been reading and really enjoying. I've never been really much of a fan of the Shadow. I didn't really know what he was all about. I knew he's a old school pulp hero.
Alec Baldwin made a movie. It starred as the Shadow back in the day.
Right. That I remember. I remember not watching that movie for sure.
Honestly, I remember watching the movie and being surprised at how much I liked it, although that was back when it came out, and I don't know if it'll hold up.
Okay. Well,
anyway, so it might be worth a watch.
But yeah, it's an interesting character, and interesting to see him crossing over with Batman. This is an alternate reality world, so it's not like continuity DC universe or anything. But the Shadow is an old school, not a private detective or anything like that, which what you might think he is. He's actually more of like a spirit of vengeance. He's kind of like a Ghost Rider with guns in a way. So it's interesting to see his version of like old school, 1930s vengeance versus sort of a more modern Batman take on justice.
You had me at Ghost Rider with guns.
Yeah, he's definitely a hardcore character. And it appears that IDW is getting ready to relaunch the character with a new #1 issue. So I'm going to jump on board with that. I remember adding it to my pull list, but I can't remember when it's coming out. But there is a new Shadow #1 coming out from IDW, so be on the lookout for that. Then I've got, of course, Batwoman #6. I'm going to be honest and say that I'm not too happy with the current run of Batwoman. It's kind of spinning its wheels a little bit, but I'm sticking with it because it's Batwoman. And then DC's Bombshells also is coming out. Issue 32 and 33. They're double shipping the Bombshells, so I'm going to continue to pick that up. If you're a fan of Power Girl, currently Bombshells is the only place you'll be able to read about Power Girl. So there you go.
I didn't realize it was double shipping. It's easier to tell when Marvel does it. I like to include both covers. I was going to surprise. Oh, and I'm going to go back one screen here. I noticed too that both of these have Marguerite Bennett attached.
Yep, that's true.
And which so kind of surprised me about the spinning of the wheels, going back again, because James Tynion, who's been rising to fame over the last couple of years, that's a pretty good writing team. So hopefully that'll go somewhere fast.
Yeah, it seems like they've been doing a lot of stuff to sort of fill in some backstory for Batwoman, and I don't know that it's really necessary for her character.
Could be because it's like still the first arc, and they're trying to, I don't know, settle her into the rebirth, whatever that means.
I don't know. It just seems like they're rehashing some old stuff. I don't know. It doesn't really have anything to do with much to do anyway with the larger DC universe. It's just sort of her grappling with demons from her past. So I don't know.
All right. Is she playing a role real quickly in Detective as well? Do you know, or was she?
Briefly, but it was more James Tynion who did Detective Comics and then passed the story on to Marguerite Bennett.
Okay. Then before we move to trades, I've got this episode's lone Vertigo book. In fact, I fell off this title because Ashley told me it had been canceled, and then I come here and see number 6 being solicited. So I'm back on this book. I had read the first issue, and I thought it was interesting, but then, kind of probably unfairly, as when your book gets canceled, you kind of lose interest in the issue in your lap, maybe. Anyway, I'm glad this is back on. I like to see stuff from Vertigo. Something's going on there, and I know with their Young Animal line, that has some promise, and maybe that's going to take over what Vertigo's used to mean to me. But I'm glad to see this title at least still out there. Clean Room and Unfollow went away last month. That leaves us then with 2 DC trades or collections on the list. Mitch, what's the first one?
The first one is DC Meets HannaBarbera. And I read two of these. I read the Green Lantern and Space Ghost one that you see here, and I also read the Johnny Quest one as well. So they were just really fun, and it was just cool to see these different heroes meet up with each other, and you got to see Space Ghost use the Green Lantern ring, and Green Lantern use Space Ghost power bands. Just an interesting combination. So if you're a fan at all of any of the old Hanna-Barbera stuff, I recommend picking this stuff up because they just did a really good job with it.
Wouldn't that be neat if it was canon?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that shake the DC universe up?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing some of these Hanna-Barberas come into the DC universe.
Yeah. Randy, I noticed you got on the DC bandwagon right here at the end with a collection.
I did, and you could probably see why, because it's written by Jack Kirby, art by Jack Kirby. This is basically Jack Kirby's dealing with his hatred of Marvel. He created a brand new universe and gave it to DC. And so this collects 10 years of Jack Kirby. I did the math. It boils down to 39 comic books that are jam-packed into this 1,500-page omnibus.
I was going to say $1,500.
No, it's $150. So if you do the math, it kind of boils down to $4 a comic. So it's pretty much what you do if you bought them in the store today.
Sure.
But I have a couple of these in the trade, and it's just I've always been curious about Jack Kirby's Fourth World, and it's got Darkseid, it's got Orion. It's just the artwork, I'm sure, is beautiful, and just really interested in it. So this looks like the place to read it.
It's an interesting month for you. There's some foreshadowing. Actually, speaking of foreshadowing, let's go to IDW. We all had something from IDW this month. Raphael and Randy share the featured IDW book. You guys had this Title Labs episode as well, I think.
Yep, I definitely did. I still haven't read the first issue. Randy, have you picked this up?
I haven't. I'm going to be honest. I didn't realize it came out yet.
Well, is it out? It's right on if here's 3, it could be right on the cusp here.
The thing is, like, I normally wouldn't put it back on the list if I had put it in my previous showing of previews, but I was doing a little bit more background research about this, and I didn't realize that each variant issue of this is actually going to have its own ending. And all the issues that come before will each have their own different clues to it. So you can have really different endings depending on which actual covers you pick up. And I just think that's hilarious. I think that's great.
That's crazy.
That's so clue.
And Randy, you had another from IDW as well.
I did. Ghostbusters 101. This is number 6. I believe this will be the last one in the story arc. And say what you will about the new Ghostbusters movie, but I feel like if you wanted to see the perfect version of those characters, you should be reading this book, because they're playing in the original Ghostbusters universe, and it's a great read. I feel like they've just got it down. So if you hated that movie at all, I think you would like it in comic book form.
Nice.
Here.
So for those who felt let down, maybe this should be the Ghostbusters you try out.
That is a perfect thing to say. Yes.
Okay. And for those of you who liked it, here's some more.
Yeah, I feel like if you watch the movie, it gives you, it kind of gives you how the characters would sound and react, and then that just gives you the basis to build your own universe from reading it here.
Nice. Okay. Well, from Ghost to Spacemen, because my choice this month is Saucer State, number 4. This is from Paul Cornell. Issue 1 just came out, and I haven't read it, but I did kind of come across a podcast where he was a recent guest, and I didn't realize the breadth and scope of his work in the comic industry. He's also evidently a rather prolific novelist. Nevertheless, after hearing that interview, I went back to reread Vertigo's Saucer Country, 1 through, I think it's 15. So this is going to pile up a little bit, but this is the sequel to that, Saucer State, number 4 of 6, I believe, coming out from IDW from Paul Cornell. And then Mitch, you've got the only trades this month from IDW. What did you find?
Well, speaking of Walt Simonson, he's back again with a new story called Ragnarok. It's Walt Simonson, the famous creator, well, not creator, but famous writer and artist for Thor, is now back with more Norse mythology in the form of Ragnarok, a 6-issue special. I'm not sure when this originally came out, but it's now being collected in trade, and I've heard there's actually a volume 2 on the way as well. So, it'll be interesting to see writer and artists who've gone away for a little while and come back into comics and see how his style has progressed, or if it's progressed. It'll be interesting to see exactly what this is all about. Have you guys heard of this before, this trade paperback?
I actually have the first issue of the floppy.
Okay.
I'm surprised to see the release date. It makes me wonder if this is the first edition of its collection, because I think the series itself is a few years old.
Yeah, I think maybe because he started working on the second volume, they decided to pick it up and get the ball rolling. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But then the other one I had is another older trade paperback. This is the definitive edition of the Mystery Society by another one of my favorite writers, Steve Niles, and everyone's favorite saga artist, Fiona Staples. And I wanted to point this out because it's just a one edition collection. There's only one story for this Mystery Society. They didn't get any more, unfortunately. But it was the first time I ever noticed Fiona Staples' art. It was the first time I ever saw something drawn by her, and it was just, one of the reasons I picked up Saga in the first place was because I saw that name on the cover and said, oh, I want to see more from this artist. Because this Mystery Society book, just the art is so very good, so very colorful, so inventive. And of course, story by Steve Niles. It's interesting.
Yeah. Looks like Steve Niles type characters to have fun with.
Yeah, definitely. Guy with his brain and a big clockwork robot, and it's just about these two sort of socialites who form their own quote unquote mystery society where they're kind of rich. I don't know, they're not superheroes or anything like that, but they just like to solve mysteries. And it was a very fun collection, and I wish it had gone somewhere. I wish there were more, but for what it is, it's very good, and I definitely recommend it.
Nice. Well, stay right there, Mitch, because as we go to Image Comics, I'm going to have you kick us off with your premiere title.
Okay, let's see. Let me look at the list here. I forgot what it was. Oh, yeah, Redlands, number 1. This one just caught my eye. Another horror comic. I don't know if I'm becoming the horror comic guy or not, but it was just an interesting idea of like a South Florida town that's got a lot of weird mysteries and things, and then a coven of killer witches come to town. So I don't know, it just seems like a good horror comic to jump in. I'm not familiar with this creative team, but I wanted to give them a chance.
Need to get you and Ashley together on our Halloween show next year.
Yeah.
As the horror expert, and maybe Raphael too. What'd you have next?
Let's see, Ghost Station Zero on page 197. From the creator who brought you Codename Babushka. It's sort of a Black Widow-ish Russian spy. And I read that trade, and I thought it was really entertaining. So again, I just wanted to give them another shot and see what they've got next planned for Babushka.
The branding reminds me of an old book from the early 2000s called Red Star. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of anime manga feel to it as well.
I had the remaining 3 Image debuts on our list. First up comes Mage, the Hero Denied, #1. And this was the title that reminded me that we're sorry, listeners, but we weren't here last month so that I could talk about the 0 issue. Mage is, well, I remember buying issue 1 of the first trilogy, Mage, the Hero Discovered, off the rack. And this is the 3rd of Matt Wagner's Mage series. Each series is 15 issues long, with the last issue being double-sized. Looks like here the first full-sized first issue is going to be perhaps double-sized as well. Anyway, this is the... Excuse me.
Phil needs a drink of water.
Yeah, I have this morning's popcorn in my throat. This is a story about a guy who discovers that he is the reincarnation of King Arthur.
Ooh, how does that change one's life? And this then would be the 3rd act. The character was originally modeled after the artist himself. So this gentleman does indeed look like Matt Wagner, or close enough to him. Anyway, this just has early memories of independent comic written all over it for me back in my formative years. So I'll be glued to this. Next up is Elsewhere #1. Haven't really heard, I don't think, of any of the creators here, but this is what happened to Amelia Earhart after she disappeared. And that is all I'll say.
I thought she ended up in that museum with Ben Stiller.
Maybe this is between then. And I don't know. Let's try to work those both in together. There's another topic. I'm going to keep going, though. Image Plus magazine. I really wouldn't talk about a house magazine, although I do really like Image's magazine. If you at all like Image Comics or the creators that work for them, this is really a really inexpensive way of getting some good articles and interviews with some top talent. Anyway, they're starting over with volume 2 of their house magazine, and what makes this special is that this is going to be the only way, for a while at least, that you can get the sequel to Scott Snyder, Witches. They're going to be publishing this in the back in serialized form, starting this August 30th. If you already buy Marvel Previews, and hey, why aren't you? Then you'll be getting this for free with your copy. However, if you don't buy Marvel Previews and you want just this, you can pick it up for $1.99. And that will take me to Black Cloud #5. It's the, I don't know, I'm falling for the branding here. There's just something about laying these out next to each other and seeing the logo with the strip of artwork across that draws me to this book. It also has a relatively, or I should say, pretty interesting story arc to me. I'm 3 issues. No, I'm sorry. I'm 2 issues in. Managed to get a kind of a nice variant from my C2E2 blind box. And I would recommend Jason Latour and Ivan Brandon's Black Cow. And this is a name that hasn't crossed my path in a while. Lescott, someone that I was a big fan of back in our first season, at least. Well, I just heard a podcast with him, and he's been out of, I don't know, the more public eye for a little while, I guess, maybe because he had Lyme disease. Nevertheless, he's back, and with another series, Generation Gone. I wanted to talk about this last month, but still too early to talk about it. But Noah Lescott from Image. And then lastly, 7 to Eternity. This is just a gimme. Are you still on this, Mitch?
Yep, still reading it.
Okay. This ends the current arc. I don't know. I didn't feel like they did too much of a break, if they did, between arcs last time. So hopefully they'll roll right into issue 10. But hop on, folks. They're kind of calling this the next saga a little bit. Anyway, that's done. I'm done hogging the Image books. Randy, I know you've got a popular returning title.
That's right. Saga number 46, An Operation and a Farewell. I mean, the cover, if you don't know what's going on, I don't want to spoil it, but you can pretty much take a good guess from what's on the cover there. It's an interesting story. It's always pushing the limits of. It just blows my mind every single time, because I originally, when I first read this, hated it, but it stewed in my brain and wouldn't leave me alone until eventually I started liking it. So it's a good book. Everybody should read it.
Very good. And returning favorites, Mitch, you've got one.
So here's one it's really returning. It's Rocket Girl number 8 on page 204. This is turning into one of those creator-owned titles that gets published like once a year. So if you're going to pick it up, this is the time to pick it up because you might not see it again for another 12 months.
Put it next to your stack of powers.
Yep, definitely. And then I wanted to throw one in here that I didn't have on my list because I hadn't read the first issue yet, but I finally got around to reading the first issue of Packlist by Dustin Weaver.
Yeah, the anthology.
Yeah, a lot of anthologies seem to be going away these days. Island Magazine is going away. I believe Dark Horse Presents is also ending.
Yeah, I believe the last issue has arrived.
So it looks like the new wave is single creator anthologies. And that's what this Packlist is. So if you want an anthology of just funny, weird, quirky stories, Packlist is a little bit more, it seems to be more science fiction oriented. There's 2 science fiction stories in it. And then there's one just weird psychological thing where a guy sort of dreams that he's a cockroach and is trying to convince himself that he's not actually a cockroach.
Isn't that Franz Kafka?
Yeah, it is very Kafka-esque. But yeah, so I'd recommend Packlist.
And I'll interject there too. The other one, also from Image, that I can think of is from Corey Lewis called Sun Bakery that Jason talks about a lot. Would be the other single creator anthology.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye out, see if that's a new trend.
Yeah.
And then the other one on my list here is, of course, Shirtless Bear Fighter number 3. This is a comic. Number 1 isn't out yet, but I mean, come on,
Didn't you have this on your list too, Raphael, a couple months back?
I'm surprised that I missed putting it on this list, Phil.
I was gonna say,
I love me some shirtless bear fighting.
Yeah. I mean, the tagline for this issue is "Don't miss the bear brawls, golden toilets, and betrayal." I mean, come on, can't miss it.
Starting to remind me of God Hates Astronauts.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's in that vein for sure. Just a goofy, fun comic.
all right, Raphael, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Before I get going, I just want to tip my hat to Phil and Mitch because, wow, that was a whole bunch of comics. And I think I only had these 2 selected, so hats off to you guys. My first pick was Extremity number 6, which you can find on page 217. This is something that we mentioned. I think one of us mentions this on at least every version of the show, at least in some format.
Yeah.
I know Jason has talked about it. I've definitely talked about it.
And I buy it because you guys talk about it.
It's just a really interesting comic. If you haven't read the first, or I think maybe the second and third are out. I'm a little behind, but it's just such an interesting world that they build in a single issue. And in the single issue that I've read, it already has kind of its own like mythos started, and that's really interesting to see. Just an interesting concept, beautiful art, and I definitely love the cover on this issue that they're doing right here, where it's just all white and blank, and you just have like the fire trickling down the page. I just think it's beautiful. So definitely still got to be buying these comics. I got a lot of homework to do, guys. I got to read up on a whole bunch of this stuff.
I think Jason, we saw Jason earlier today, and I think he was talking about, if not this book, he was talking about Daniel Warren Johnson.
Mm-hmm. My next pick is actually a graphic novel, and I picked this one specifically because Phil, you talk about it. It seems quite a bit. So, and I'm kind of on a Highlander kick lately, and it's kind of reminded me of it. So I definitely kind of had to wait to pick it up in trade paperback form, but I'm definitely going to give it a shot since you gave it such a good recommendation.
Yeah, I've been enjoying this, and it's coming back too. And I think I might have figured out how Rucka works, or at least how Image works with Rucka. He's going. This is the end of the current arc. He's going on a break, but as a result, I don't remember the name of his other title. is now back on again for another 5-issue stint. So I think he like alternates series. So this will be back with an issue 6 in another couple months. Mitch, I want you to choose or close out Image. You found some good collections.
Okay, sure. One that we just mentioned is Sun Bakery on page 208. Just like you guys, I heard Jason talk about this, and he was like just chomping at the bit for every single issue of this. He couldn't wait. So I just want to see what the fuss is all about and pick up the trade paperback. Again, it's the anthology. And then finally, on page 199 of Hadrians Wall trade paperback, I picked up the first issue of this, and it was kind of an interesting detective story in space kind of thing. But then I fell off it, and I kept waiting and waiting for the trade. So it seems like it's taken at least a full year to get this trade out. So I'm just interested to see what it is. And one of the reviews of it say that it's a love letter to Blade Runner, Outland, and Aliens, which are 3 of my favorite old school sci-fi movies. So if it lives up to that billing, I'll definitely be happy with it.
So here's a quick tangent. You've got to be looking forward then to the Blade Runner sequel coming soon. Yeah,
I'm intrigued, definitely. I haven't been too happy with Ridley Scott lately, but
wow.
he's always good for a comeback.
All right. Well, next we're going to finish out the premiere titles with Marvel Comics. Before we talk about the titles that we shared, though, Mitch and Raphael, you each had a Marvel debut. Mitch, what is it that put Thor's on your radar?
Well, it's Jason Aaron, one of our favorite writers here at the Comics.
Aaron.
That's right. And this is one of my casualties from the Marvel boycott was that I stopped reading Thor. So, I figured I'd pick back up and see how they're going to have 2 Thors coexist. It'll be interesting.
And can I ask in general, these are a series of one-shots, correct?
I believe so.
Right.
Okay. Because I saw one-shot listed in some of them, but not all of them. But I got the feeling they were all from the same, air quotes, family of books.
Seems like something happens that sends today's heroes back in time to meet either like the past people who had their mantle.
Or people that it makes odd sense that they would meet. For example, Raphael's choice, which surprises me. I didn't know you were a Hawkeye fan, Raphael.
Well, you see, that's the thing. I picked this one specifically, not for myself, but because I'm going to buy it for a friend of mine who's, he's not an avid comic reader. His common complaint is that superheroes often seem really overpowered and there's no real danger for them. But for some reason, he seems to love Hawkeye. And he can't get enough of like Kate Bishop Hawkeye specifically. So when I saw this comic, I was just like, well, I'm going to have to pick this up for him since it actually has both. Like I said, I'm not a huge Hawkeye fan. But still, it seems, interesting enough that I definitely pick up a one-shot.
Okay. Does he make a distinction between movie Hawkeye and comic Hawkeye?
Honestly, he seems like, like most people, like they enjoy like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But he really has, some sort of like affinity for the Kate Bishop character specifically. He's gone out and bought some trade paperbacks featuring her. And I'm not exactly sure what it is about Hawkeye that does it for him. He's never been a character that I've, considered too much. I definitely prefer Hawkeye in the movie to Hawkeye in the actual comics, but I think this might be a good jumping on point for him. And I'm always, looking to get my friends into Marvel Comics whenever I can.
Sure. Well, this next one, you also share with Mitch, and I guess I was a little surprised coming off our X-Men episode that we just had. We don't often get an Inhumans book crossing our path.
Yeah, I mean, why not? They're still trying to push the Inhumans, and I've never been a big anti-Inhumans person. It's just they've never had a real great story to get me hooked on them. So maybe this will be the one.
I think
Ryan North too, who's pretty good.
I think the big problem with Inhumans is that they're just so often compared with the X-Men. And normally there's room for both, but once Marvel kind of put them in a contest against each other, things got ugly really fast. But it was still nice to be introduced to the Inhumans because I think Black Bolt is a really cool character, and I really would love to get a little bit more backstory into kind of early Black Bolt and how he kind of deals with his family because the Inhumans have been around for such a long time, and I'd rather not go back appearances and have to try to buy all those trades to just kind of figure out why certain characters behave as they do around each other.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Black Bolt doesn't speak. And did you read Black Bolt #1?
I did not read Black Bolt #1, but I did read Inhumans Prime #1.
Okay.
Yeah, Black Bolt does not speak, and I did read the first one.
How does that go with a main character that doesn't speak?
I forget if he actually spoke, but he's if you read the other book, Royals, you found out that Maximus switched places with Black Bolt. So now Black Bolt is stuck in the prison that was meant for Maximus.
That's kind of what I figured. When I read the early solicits, I was like, yep. So when they started talking about the prison, I was like, this starts to kind of starting to sound like some shenanigans.
And, they can't just go free him because it was the last royal decree that Medusa made before she gave up her queenship. So I guess they can't just go and say, hey, get him out. He has to break himself out if he wants out.
Well, Mitch, Raphael, Randy, and I see you're Inhumans, and we raise you 2 Jean Greys. Randy, what are you expecting here?
Well, I like how it has 2 meanings. If you have young Jean going back in time once again and meeting the old Phoenix, because she's afraid of the Phoenix right now, but it says, will she find the key to saving herself or learn that her fate is sealed? That applies to both of these Jeans,
right?
Because my look on it is what's going to happen to old Jean Grey when she sees her younger self show up, and how is she going to react to that in continuity? So it looks really interesting to me.
Well, you say the magic word continuity because we were talking, I think it was last episode, a little bit about the Generations line in general, and if they are indeed one-shots, will they have any impact on the other books? And so I was kind of looking through previews with, of all these Generations titles, which would be most likely to have impact, or where do I want to be when that happens? And this is why I chose that book.
Because you read the solicit, it sounds like it's right in line with where the Jean Grey story is going. So, this could be issue #4 in that series.
All right. And that was the other thing too. I'm not reading Jean Grey on your recommendation and liking it. So that was not something I was going to pick up. But I'm enjoying it. And so this is why this also makes my list.
Cool.
Also, Randy, you share our first returning title with another panelist. So, guys, tell me about Cable.
Where to begin with Cable?
Yeah. The best thing about this is Cable he's basically doing what he does best. He's kicking butt and traveling through time.
And I know Ruben gave me a shout out in the last episode where he describes Cable walking into a saloon full of cowboys, and he was like, Raphael would love that. And he was right. I loved every second of it.
Yeah, the first issue definitely ended on a cliffhanger, but it's a great mystery, a cool action adventure.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see Cable kind of actually jump around through time. So much of what you see is Cable showing up and saying, like, I just went to the future. You have to listen to everything I say, but you never really get to see him on those travels. And it's just interesting to see him go to feudal Japan and the Old West and just kind of get into some crazy hijinks and fight people. And every single time he goes to, it's just fun. It's just a fun comic.
I'm noticing the writer James Robinson. I don't know if you recognize that name, but if so, do you know him from other X titles? I know him from, I think, DC Starman from back in the day. He was on. That's who I'm thinking of. Okay. Anyway, well, Randy, I know you had a few more Marvels on your list too.
Yes, I do. So coming up next, we have X-Men Blue, number 9 and 10. They're separated in the previous book on page 17 and then on page 87.
Yeah, that is so confusing.
Yeah, well, I think it's just because they did all the Secret Empire titles together. X-Men Blue number 9 deals with, of course, Secret Empire. We have the return of Polaris, which is pretty cool. And then going into number 10, it looks like we see the young X-Men Beast is going to actually maybe get his new Beast form. He's meddling with magic, and something's probably going to mess with him. So it looks very interesting. Moving on next is what I'm most excited about, I think, is the Weapons of Mutant Destruction storyline. Weapon X number 7 is going to be the aftermath of that. It's they basically combine the DNA of everybody in the Weapon X program with the Hulk. So I don't know if it's a new character or if someone else has taken on this crazy mantle, but I will be here to tell you all about it.
I want him to get a symbiote on him.
That while holding Thor's hammer, that'll be the.
You know, he might as well be possessed by a Ghost Rider at that point.
Yeah, and he needs a flaming skull. Moving on next is a comic that is always solid with beautiful artwork and a cool story. Nick Fury number 5 by James Robinson and art by Aiko.
Same author as... Oh, never mind. I'm not going to go back. But you know what I'm talking about. Same author.
Well, it's a great book. If you're not reading it, you should be reading it. And if you can't read, you'll get the same impact from looking at the pictures because they're so beautiful. So I've said it before. Every book is a contained kind of mission with a kind of a overarching thing of Nick Fury versus Hydra, and it's just cool.
I noticed the issue number. Obviously, this is not its first volume. How far back do you had to go? Because I know you've spoken highly of this. When did it start getting good? From the beginning?
Yeah, okay. right out of the gate. Nick Fury number 1 was an awesome book that just evoked that 1960s original Nick Fury feel.
Okay. Well, but weren't there previous volumes though before this most recent incarnation that you were reading?
There were some stories,
all different Nick Fury or something.
I don't think so. I know there were some stories of Nick Fury Jr. kind of sparsed in some of those like annual books, and but
that's what I'm thinking of.
I don't think he got his own title until this one.
All right. Well then, nice that he has his book.
Yeah, it's great. You should read it. And then I think last for me is Old Man Logan number 27. He's going up against the Hulk again, so I'm not sure how he's fighting the Maestro, but he just got done hopping through his own past, which was a cool homage to the original Logan in that storyline. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with this, but the cover art just looks awesome.
Yeah,
Old Man Logan versus Hulks.
With what? Is it
that's a Gatling
gun?
Yeah. That is a Gatling gun.
At first, when I saw this cover, I thought it was the Punisher.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Sure.
So it's good stuff.
All right. Well, that takes us to, I believe, Raphael, do you have a returning title here?
Yep. Speaking of the Punisher, my next pick was Punisher number 15. And I've talked a lot of crap about this comic, but I did quite a bit of homework before this show. And I went back and I caught up with all the issues that are out right now. And this isn't a joke. At one point, Frank Castle swings a bear trap around on a chain and kills a whole bunch of people with it.
Okay.
And I never knew I wanted to see that, but apparently I really did because I'm still reading this comic. It finally finished its first arc back in issue, I want to say 11. So now he's no longer hunting down the same drug dealers that he was in issue 1. So I'm just happy to see him not deal with drug dealers anymore.
So your diligence has paid off.
Yes, it has. It's a comic that has its moments, and I mean it's a Punisher comic, and that carries some weight. I mean, even when it's not great, it's still pretty good. So I'm still going to keep buying it. I don't know why, but I'm going to keep buying it. And then my next choice is X-Men Gold number 9. And I haven't been reading X-Men Gold. I've been sticking with X-Men Blue this whole time. But I'm kind of interested in this comic because it's kind of picking up on some Kitty Pryde Colossus stuff. And they were always one of my favorite Marvel couples for some reason. I just thought they made a great pair. So, I'd like to see that kind of get resolved. It's one of those complicated relationships where one is dead half the time, so it can't really go anywhere. But I'd just like to see a little bit of resolution on that.
I feel like X-Men Gold has gotten better as a series as it's been going on as well. So
I think it would be better in a marathon session, like in trade.
yeah, well, there's just something off-putting about the first issue, and it had that big scandal behind the artwork. But once you got past all of that, I feel like the book got better with each issue.
Talking about hidden significance, is there any in the cover down there on the lower right? What is the shape he's making out of what looks to be a metal thing?
Those are carbonadium tendrils. That's Omega Red, and he's making the Omega symbol.
Oh, I don't know that character.
Oh, originally introduced in X-Men #4 of the second volume. It's an awesome story. So they're really tugging at our heartstrings with these classic characters. That's another reason why I like these books.
I almost forgot that Randy read X-Men.
It looks like it's been double shipped too.
Well,
Issue 9 and 10 coming out.
Oh yes, 9 to 10 there. Luckily, in this case, though, on page 78 and 79 for your ordering convenience. Speaking of, instead of what Randy would like, things that Mitch might like, Secret Empire, number 8, 9, and 10.
I like this.
The series is rushing up. I know, I'm poking a stick at Mitch.
I couldn't pick everything. You guys have to talk too.
This is something I'm not reading, but as soon as we got done talking about, what episode was this where we were talking about Secret Empire not too long ago? Anyway, I rushed right out and got them all as soon as we stood up from that episode. So here it is, the finale. What's the event that comes after Empire?
Return of the Jedi.
Good answer. And with
Whoa.
I'll go to my next pick, Spider-Man 2, number 2. Didn't get to talk about this last month because we weren't here, but I don't know who in the room, raise your hand, read Spider-Man 1.
I did.
Okay. Do you want to describe the last page cliffhanger?
If I remember it correctly, it was Spider-Man of this universe.
Peter Parker.
Yes, Peter Parker was trying to figure out who the Miles Morales was of this universe. Mm-hmm. And it ended with him kind of just with a shocked look on his face.
Yes.
And then we never talked about it again.
Yep. Cliffhanger ending. So the draw for me here, at least, is in Spider-Man 2. The teaser is, at least, that we will learn who using an old-fashioned term, the 616 universe's Miles Morales is, if all is to be believed.
I hope it's Childish Gambino.
I don't even know. I'm trying to think. I had another, and now you've made me
Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze. I like that.
He's zero cool.
Mitch, save us with your first collection.
Sure. How about the Iron Fist Volume 1, The Gauntlet? There we go. There it is.
There it is.
So I read the first issue of this, and it just had a cool sort of old school kung fu movie vibe to it. So this trade comes out in September, so I'm hoping the Marvel boycott will be over by then, and I'll be able to read this.
What's going to take for you to come out of that boycott?
They're gonna have to fix Captain America.
But what does that mean, though?
When does the last issue of Secret Empire come out?
Yeah, that's what it's gonna take. They're gonna have to say that
it was all just a big something, and now Cap is Cap again.
Yep, that's
okay. All right, that's fair enough. I'm trying to think. Did you have more? No. Let's throw this over to Randy.
So back in the day, they came out with a reprint X-Men comic called X-Men Classic, which, just reprinted all of the original comics. It was easier to get them. That's where I originally read a lot of the stories because I couldn't get the old comics. But the joy of these was after every reprint was an original story that just dove deeper into it. So you'd have these small stories that took place like right after this happened in the first issue or right after this happened in the second issue. So they just kind of expand on the Marvel story, and there's some really cool realistic artwork. And I think this would just be a wonderful collection of books to add to your collection or anybody who likes X-Men.
was gonna say I've heard you talking about that recently. Those stories. Who did they bring in for art teams back then? And did they try to mimic the look and feel of the style?
No, it was a completely different style, and if I remember correctly, it was almost like it almost looked like a realistic pencil rendering on a lot of the artwork. So it had a different feel to it, but it was just I don't know, it was just really cool to read.
Okay, so that's going to be a good. That's omnibus, yeah, huge.
Yeah, it's expensive, but I would say it's worth every penny.
Yeah. And the convenience of having it all under one cover, if you're not going to go digital.
So true.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up our premier publishers. So next, we will turn our attention to the back half of the catalog, home of miscellaneous indie and merchandise sections. We'll start by talking indie comics. The section is as big as all the premier publishers combined, which means it's like lightning striking when some of us choose the same book. And I don't think any of us did, although a little bit later, I'm not sure that's so true. I'm going back to check the list here. It looks like, Randy, why don't you kick us off with the indie section?
Sure. I have Adventure Time regular show #1 from Boom Studios. And I like Adventure Time, but I'm an even bigger fan of the regular show. And it's I think I haven't watched the latest season, but I know it's the last season. So any chance for me to get more regular show, I'm gonna pick it up because it's such a fun show. So seeing these two universes collide, I think it's going to be pretty cool. And just looking at the artwork, and I don't know, it's going to be a zany ride.
And both of those are at least teen plus shows. Is that correct?
I would say so, but I think anybody who's in their 30s could easily identify with regular show.
Okay, I guess my point being not for the young chillins.
I think it could easily be for the young chillins.
Oh,
but
okay.
You'll get, it's kind of like Pee-wee's Playhouse. There's something for the adult audience too.
That's a good analogy. Okay.
So
Yeah, there's nothing really adult about Adventure Time, honestly. I mean, nothing that would be objectionable.
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm kind of
Not like Rick and
confusing that
Morty.
with. That's exactly what I was kind of confusing that with. My bad. Maggie would be all over this, wouldn't she?
possibly.
Back in the day. Well, Raphael, I'm going to toss this to you. I know we've kind of had the X-Wing miniatures game enter our lives, and you've got a book that's based on a miniatures game as well.
Yes, I do. And this one, probably not as good for the kids, unless the kids are filthy heretics who need to be purged. I love Warhammer. I've talked about it a few times. I'm a big fan of the miniature game. This comic series that they're doing is actually, it's not a new series. So the title that I selected was Warhammer 40,000 Fallen #1. Apparently, the way that this ongoing Warhammer series is going to work is that they're going to renumber it every single time that they reach a new story arc. So the current story arc that they're doing is Will of Iron. And as soon as that one kind of concludes and they kind of finish up that story, they're going to start this one and they're just going to renumber it. So it's going to be a brand new #1. But it still follows the same character who at the start of the series is kind of a rookie who has never really been in combat before. And the series kind of slowly follows him throughout the years as he becomes a veteran and he kind of starts rising up through the ranks of, the Imperial military. And there's a few kind of implications that the first series kind of presents where, him and his group of, fellow Marines kind of appear to be, kind of in an area where they might be tainted by the forces of chaos. And where that occurs, they send in these guys who you see on the cover, who are called the Grey Knights, who are basically Space Marine demon slayers. But they also have a bad habit of basically blowing up entire planets to hide the fact that they exist. So kind of, some interesting implications in the next series. And I like the fact that they're slowly expanding on, the universe a little bit more and more. They just kind of keep bringing in new kind of, rich sources of, story and plot points. And I really love that.
Do you know, does the game feed the book or does the book feed the game? Is there kind of relationship?
The game is kind of really open-ended. So I guess if you really want to kind of, view it like that, it's definitely the book that feeds the game. just because it gives you a little bit more backstory about how certain groups operate. But it's nothing that you wouldn't be able to learn, I think, by playing the game really extensively. The lore has existed for maybe 20 or 30 years, so it all depends on how far you want to dive in.
Yeah, I've started listening to some of the audio books, and they're really good.
Okay. Very good. Well, the next one I have on my list, I kind of had you in mind, Mitch. Josephine, this comes from Amaze Inc., aka Slave Labor. This is a wordless story by Kevin Sacco. Words, well, as much as it can be, story, maybe an art. The story of it's a civil rights era tale, says here, about a boy who has to accompany his nanny through areas of town he would not otherwise have ever visited. But anyway, it's done in a wordless fashion, and ever since we've started like getting into Love the Tiger and the Fox, etc., those kind of stories have kind of perked up on my radar.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
So that's why I chose this one. Also from Boom Studios, and I think 4 of our 6 or 7 books on this list come from Boom, is Grass Kings #6 by Matt Kint and Tyler Jenkins. This book is getting some critical acclaim. I'm 3 issues in. I'm going to put it down and give myself another time to purge through them. But this will be on my list. And really interesting variant covers if you're into such a thing. High quality production value. Well, you got some heavy cardstock on this.
Yeah, I've read the first couple issues. The art is really good. That watercolor style is just amazing.
Makes me wish just some of Jason's feedback on this if he's reading it too.
Yeah, he talked about it a little bit today at the movie. He's reading it.
Oh, did he? Okay. Very good. Well, Mitch, I'll toss over to you to take it for the next 3.
Okay, so we have Lady Mechanica, the Clockwork Assassin #2. The Benitez production, that's the name of the writer and artist, Joe Benitez. And he's been doing some interesting stuff as a lone publisher of his own material. It seems to be, of any of the independent publishers that I read, which isn't a large amount, I'll admit, but his seemed to be the most professional and just most well done. And he's definitely messing with the business model to see, I think, what works, because he had been publishing just 6-issue miniseries and then a trade, kind of like the Image comic model.
Mm-hmm.
But now he seems to be doing 3-issue story arcs, so a little 3-issue miniseries, and that's what this is as well. So he's put out, I think this will be the second one of those 3-issue miniseries, so I don't know if he's going to combine those 2 miniseries into a trade, but it seems like he's shortening up the business model, and I'm not sure if that's for financial reasons or what, but it's worked out very well. I really enjoyed the first one, so I'm looking forward to this one.
If I might, you kind of raise a point that comes with previews. If you do pre-order, you're always pre-ordering 2 months out. So conceivably, the book, the #1 that arrives or that you are ordering now, you won't see in your hands until conceivably you are asked to commit to an issue 2 and an issue 3 without even seeing issue 1 yet. Right. So using that model, you've ordered the whole series, without seeing them. Yeah, I mean it's common for pre-order. Have you been able to recognize, or have they been doing this for long enough, if there are story elements from one miniseries that you can kind of recognize, in another?
They're mostly separate, but there is an overarching story of Lady Mechanica, who she is, where she comes from, because that's one of the big mysteries about her. She doesn't even know herself where she comes from. It's one of those Jason Bourne, lost my memory kind of situations.
Okay.
So she goes on these little different adventures, and then in each adventure, she maybe picks up a little clue about her past or something.
All right.
All right. Next, we had another one of the gems of the month here. Mech Cadet U #1. Greg Pak, the writer, what really drew me to this. He's a really good writer. If you've read any of his Incredible Hercules, or I think he's done Hulk and all kinds of stuff. He's a very good writer, and this looks like sort of a take on the classic anime kind of boy mysteriously becomes the pilot of a giant robot and has to defend the world. This looks pretty fun. And that's also from Boom Studios.
Mm-hmm.
And then my final pick here is an interesting one. It's Victor Laval's Destroyer, number 4. Have you guys heard of this title at all?
No, this surprised me. All three of you surprised me.
Yeah, I thought this one might be a bit of a surprise because this is one I just saw on the shelf at Summit, and I wasn't gonna pick it up, but the artwork on the cover was very intriguing to me, so I picked it up, and I kind of wanted to do a whole episode on just this one comic book, but we can't do that here, so I'm just gonna say,
Wow.
pick it up. It's a modernized take on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's very intriguing to me. This Victor Laval, he's a novelist, trying his hand now at comic books, and he took a very, very interesting approach to this comic. So I definitely recommend just pick up the first issue, see if you like what he's doing with the Frankenstein mythos, and it's very intriguing.
Is it how violent is it?
Yeah, it's pretty violent.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Boy.
it's Frankenstein monster,
Another one for my order form.
I don't know if they have any issues left at Summit or not, but it was just sitting there on the shelf. They only had a couple of issues, so I decided to pick it up and just give it a try.
Is it do you know, is it ongoing? I don't see of any number.
I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
I thought it was a limited series, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I mean, that should be the lesson. Neat. Well, that's it for our indie comics. But we actually had lightning strike in the indie merchandise sections. Raphael, I believe it was you and Randy that shared the next one. I want to see Randy riding down the street on his motorcycle in this.
I wouldn't, for fear of actually getting shot.
Well, I think you'd be okay because it's a pretty convincing replica.
Yeah, convincing. It will convince a bullet. No, I was actually just looking around, and you can get a pretty similar tactical vest for half the price if you just want to spray paint one yourself. But it does look pretty cool, and will complete anyone's Punisher costume.
Well, I've got a wedding coming up this weekend, and my girlfriend told me to wear something nice. And
Dress for the job you want, not the one you have.
Exactly. This looks pretty nice, so I think I'm going to wear this.
Leaves an impression.
Just wear a nice bow tie with it. You'll be all set.
Or a depression.
There you go.
Okay.
Zing.
Randy, you had another one?
I did. On the previous page, you have X-Men laser cut figural key rings. Here it looks like we just have the designs, but the final output of these are those nice little 3D little figures on a key ring. So I guess I would be hoping for that little Xavier there. I think it looks pretty cool.
All right. Those are fun. In the listing itself, it's like you're buying a box of a dozen or something. So I would say look for these in stores around that date. Unless you indeed got a box.
I usually find these at like Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
Most times. So.
All right. Well, speaking of little figures, I'm kind of a sucker for Fallout. I won't buy just any Fallout thing, but a lapel pin will be good for me. I've kind of been getting into for whatever reasons. I was talking about this for breakfast today, collecting pins to stick on my backpack. So this will be a nice addition to that collection. Also, and I almost say this for Travis's sake, Scott Pilgrim is going to be a game. Scott Pilgrim, precious little card game. This is coming out from Renegade Game Studio in shops August 30th, at least from previews. My guess is the game distributors may have it on a different date, unless that's just the street date. But this looks fun. It's a card deck building game. So kind of like Magic, where there is a strategy in the cards you choose, if I'm not mistaken. So fans of Brian Lee O'Malley's Scott Pilgrim will want to take a look at this. Next, we have a really interesting item. It makes me want to stand still. Mitch, you want to talk us about this?
Sure. This is from the Hollywood Collectibles Group, the same people that brought you the $500 pulse rifle that you could buy, or the $1,200 smart gun
I remember you guys talking about that.
You
I
can.
bought 3.
Yes, we've all got several of these, I'm sure, to fill out our aliens cosplay. But now you can have it fully filled out with your $700 aliens motion tracker replica. And like I said, this is from the Hollywood Collectibles group, so they like to say how accurate they are. And they actually went down and they tracked down the original components that they used to make the prop in the movie, so that they could, build a prototype based on those parts that were used to make up the prop to bring us this really expensive replica.
That's my toolbox handle on the right.
Yeah, I think that's like from a cordless drill or something.
I was gonna say a coffee maker and some sort of stopwatch timer thing.
Well, if given the price, I have to almost believe the description to be true. It looks like there is this is on the bottom paragraph there, a video sequence that will beep and stuff. So that's fun. Although for that price, these days, you could probably put a motion sensor in there.
Yeah, you could probably just build a real motion tracker.
Right. But one that would not look so cool. Anyway, keep going. You're on a roll.
All right. Next from our What Weird Thing Can You Put the Death Dealer on? From Dark Horse Comics, we have the Death Dealer lunchbox. So your 7-year-old can take this to lunch in your local school.
Makes you hungry just looking at it.
Yeah. The last time I mentioned the Death Dealer, he was in a snow globe. So now he's on a lunchbox. They'll put him on anything these days.
I feel like it would make your lunch taste like metal.
I think so.
I want a Death Dealer nightlight.
Does it come with a thermos?
It better.
Ooh, yeah, I don't have the price here, but that's a good question. They used to back in the day, right? All the good ones. It's been so long since I bought a lunchbox.
I don't think this is for actually storing lunches. It's for, I think,
It's for
storing,
collectors
yeah,
who will keep them in the box. That box comes in.
storing the hearts of your enemies. And then finally, sort of to honor the movie that we just finished watching, is the Wonder Woman sword replica letter opener. The famous God Killer sword from the movie here. And if you want to see a cool YouTube video, there's a YouTube series called Man at Arms.
Yeah, good series.
Yeah, where they actually built one of these swords from scratch. Like they hammered out the metal and show you how they would go about, like a real swordsmith would go about making this sword.
That must have been hard at only 7 inches.
Yeah, well, they made a full-size version. But yeah, this is just the replica letter opener, so you can open letters of the gods, I guess.
I know this sounds really, really weird, but I was just looking to replace a letter opener that broke. And here's what I use mine for, comic book fans. They are really helpful for getting really old comic bags open, where the tape has, I don't know, somebody used industrial strength, packing tape to stick that bag closed or whatever, and it's been sitting in your box or in the sun for 10 years. I use a letter opener to get those old bags open, and mine just snapped. That's how strong a tape I just encountered. So this is perfect timing, and I am adding this to my list.
That's a good idea, Phil.
I know, right?
I've run into that a lot recently.
It is the perfect tool for opening comic bags, and I never would have thought it. It was just some swag I got from some office event, but it's what I've been using it for. So I was happy to see this on your list.
All right, now you got the God Killer letter opener.
Yes, there we go. And I got the comic bag tape killer. So this may be an obvious one, but we kind of talked about this. Pop quiz. Who do you think had the most valuable item this month? I should say most valuable, the highest retail value.
I say Mitch.
The alien thing, probably.
Yes, it was indeed the motion detector. I saw that price. I was like, yeah, he's going to get that.
It's not just some cheap plastic prop.
Nope. It will detect aliens.
It practically pays for itself, really.
Sure.
Yes, and all the trophies you'll be getting. All right. Well, guys, hey, based on the selections that our panelists submitted before the show, this is some of how this month's numbers stacked up. Some went down, some went up. Boom, almost made it enough boom, to get on this list. Hopefully, anyway, at least some of the over 60 items that we recommended are things that you found interesting too and might not have otherwise seen or been aware of. I'd like to thank our panelists for going through this month's 600-plus page issue of previews and whittling things down to just a few favorites list. I'm going to give you guys a chance to make any last-minute shout-outs and tell us where you can be found. Mitch.
Hi, this is Mitch. You can find me on Twitter at Zebu_Nation or on YouTube where I make Let's Play video game videos.
Raphael, are you still in hiding?
If my mic is working, no, I am out of hiding. And after this, I'm off to go feed the hamster, which is not a euphemism. I have to go feed the hamster.
Oh, okay. So zoology is now in your realm of skills.
Just hamsters.
Oh, alrighty.
Starting a
I'm
farm.
going to have to Google that later. Maybe I better not. Randy, save us.
Hey everybody, this is Randy. I read X-Men, and if you'd like me to join me on my journey, come and listen to the I Read X-Men series on YouTube on the Silent Flick Productions channel. Got a new one, probably going to record either today or tomorrow.
Okay. And if you'd like to find an easy link to all of the sites that our panelists are kind of involved with, check the sidebar on our site at www.comics.community. That's where we appear twice a month in all your favorite podcatchers. That includes episode 74 coming. Wait a minute. My script is all messed up here. Look at the screen. Podcast number 78 comes this June 12th, where we're going to talk about the Wonder Woman movie. We saw it just this very morning. And then episode 79, which I think I'm going to change up on everybody. And then we'll be back here again in 1 month on July 10th, where we'll be talking about all the books coming out. July, August, September, 2 months out. And that will be our last episode of previews under our current guise. Again, a reminder, go check readacomic.com. Until then, I'm Phil, your host. Thanks for tuning in, and here is to good comics.